So let's start using our trig ratio knowledge to find unknown side lengths. So you will be using your calculator, your scientific calculator, which might look something like this, to use it now. On them, you'll see the buttons for sine, cos, and tan. Okay, and usually you press, the button, then you're putting the degrees, which is the angle side, and you hit equals, and it'll give you what that's equal to. Now yours should all be in degrees. There is another way called radians, but scientific calculators are usually just in degrees. Now, don't forget about our trig ratios, our mnemonic. Do you remember what it is? So, ka, to, wa. So sine angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cos angle equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tan angle equals opposite over adjacent. Now we're going to start using those to solve problems. So let's find the unknown side to 2 decimal places. So you see here we've got a right angled triangle where we know the hypotenuse, that's 9.5 centimetres. We know the size of that angle, 26 degrees, and we wish to find out the size of that side. Now, that side, x, is it adjacent or opposite to the angle that we know? It is adjacent because it is next to it. Okay, so because it is adjacent to it, that means, going back to here, adjacent, okay, I've got to use my cos ratio. So cos angle equals adjacent over hypotenuse. All right, so I've written my formula. Then I substituting what I know. Cos 26 degrees equals x over 9.5. Now I have to transpose this to make x the subject so I can solve for x. So I'm going to times both sides by 9.5. So 9.5 times by cos 26 degrees equals x. Now notice I don't work out cos 26 degrees until the very end, okay, because that will mean you'll have to do quite a lot of rounding, so let's not do the rounding until the very end. Okay, now I'm going to bring up my calculator. Now I haven't got a scientific calculator on my computer, I've only got my big CAS one, so the way I enter it in will be a bit different. Well, not that different. There's my cos. I put in 26. Now let's try that again actually. Putting 9.5 times by cos 26 degrees. And that gives me 8.53854. Okay, and it's set to 2 decimal places. So x is equal to 8.54 centimetres. So with any of these type of questions, we look at what we've been given, the information we've been given, we identify which trig ratio to use, we write out the formula, substituting the knowns and unknowns, transpose it and solve. Okay, so here's another one. Okay, there's my angle of interest there, my reference angle. This time, I want to figure out what the hypotenuse is. Now, I know that's the hypotenuse because it's opposite the right angle. Now, what is this side? Is it opposite or adjacent to the angle? It's opposite the angle, so that means, and because it's opposite the angle, and we want to figure out the hypotenuse, that means we have to use sine, our sine ratio, which is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so sine 32 degrees equals 4.5 over x. Okay, here I've got to do a couple of steps to solve this, don't I, to transpose this. I'm going to times both sides by x first to get it out of the fraction. X times by sine 32 degrees equals 4.5. And then I have to divide both sides by sine 32 degrees. So x equals 4.5 divided by sine 32 degrees. Okay, and so 4.5 divided by sine 32 degrees. Now, it's a little thing, but notice that when we write cos and sine, we don't capitalize the C or the S, okay? Something to keep in mind. So, x is equal to 8.49186, and as that's to 2 decimal places, x is approximately equal to 8.49 centimetres. So here we come to a worded question with bearings. Araj set out on a bushwalking expedition. Using a compass, he set off on a course of north 70 degrees east. Now, the way we write this in bearings is 070 degrees true, and travelled a distance of 7 kilometres from his base camp. So we have to, in the end, figure out how far east he travelled and how far north he has travelled from the base camp. And we have to give the answers correct to 2 decimal places. Now, remember our compass. Okay, so north, east, south, west. North sort of ends up being the most important one that we always indicate on maps and things. So if you ever look at a map, it'll indicate where north is. So let's draw what is happening here. Remember, that's always our first thing to do if we don't get a diagram or a clear diagram, is to draw a diagram of our own. Okay, so Araj starts off from a base camp here. Now we've got north going that way. Now he's gone off on a course of 70 degrees, like that. Okay, so 70 degrees. And he's walked 7 kilometres. Okay, so now we want to figure out how far east he has travelled. Now, that is that one, isn't it? That's that, because that way is north, north, east. So how far east has he travelled from his original base camp? I'll put a B down there, capital B for base camp. And I'll mark that side as, with an E for east. Okay, so our reference, our angle of interest is here. The side length we know is the hypotenuse as it's opposite the right angle. That side we don't know, the one we're trying to figure out, is opposite the angle, so that makes that sine, doesn't it? So I'll put part A, sine angle equals opposite over hypotenuse, so sine 70 degrees equals opposite, so it's E over 7. So 7 times sine 70 degrees E. Then I get my calculator. So 7 times sine 70 degrees. That gives me 6.57785 equals to E. Okay, so rounded off, he travelled Araj travelled 6.58 kilometres east. Okay, so part B, how far north has he travelled? So that's that side, isn't it? How far north has he travelled? How far in that direction? So I've got my angle of interest there, the hypotenuse there, and that's adjacent, so that means we have to use cos. So cos angle equals adjacent over hypotenuse, so cos 70 degrees equals, I call that N over 7. So 7 times cos 70 degrees equals to N. Let's get my calculator out. 7 times cos 70 degrees. That is 2.39414 equals to N. And we had to do it to 2 decimal places, so Araj travelled 2. Now looking at this, that's 394, so that 4 doesn't round that up, so 2.39 kilometres north. So let's think about the steps that we do when we're doing our trig ratios. So steps for solving with trigonometric ratios. Okay, so step 1. What's usually our step 1? Draw a diagram. Okay, draw a diagram or a picture of the situation if it's not there or not clear. Step 2. What do you think step 2 is? Identify the ratio, I should say the trig ratio. The trig ratio to use. And how do we do that? SOHCAHTOA. I don't mind if at the top of every page that you work that you write that on. Okay, so we identify which trig ratio to use. Step 3. Write out the formula. Out the formula. Step 4. Substitute in your knowns. So that's, your angle amounts or your side lengths if you know them, and your unknowns. Okay. Step 5. Transpose the formula to solve for your unknown. And that's it. That are the steps we follow for any of these trig ratio questions.